The story starts with a big-chested woman slept in her messy room. A shining magic circle appeared around her. Startled, she jumped, but before she knew it, the floor disappeared, and she fell down, landing on her butt in the middle of a huge temple. She looked around in shock, trying to figure out where she was and how she got there, even wondering if she was going crazy. That's when she noticed she wasn't alone. A weak and injured boy knelt before her, saying in awe that he had somehow summoned the legendary Sigaholic Sama. The woman froze, more confused than ever, not just because of the boy, but because of that strange title. This was Agasa Yukira, a woman who only moments earlier had been stuck in her dirty room, tired of modern life. Her days were always the same, lying around in her own mess, grumbling about everything. She worked at a call center, answering angry customers who shouted at her about late orders. Even when she stayed calm, she was still blamed for wasting people's time. The only place she could relax was the company's smoking room. But even there, her co-workers stared and whispered behind her back. Still, she told herself that the ruder the customer, the better her cigarette tasted. One day, as she went to the smoking room, she saw a notice on the wall. It said the room would be removed to make the workplace healthier. That was the final straw. Igasa quit everything and shut herself inside her small, cheap apartment. Back in the present, the boy gave his name Grimwell, a demon who studied old ruins and history. He quickly tried to calm her down, saying that even though he was a demon, he wasn't dangerous at all. Then his eyes widened, as if he remembered something important. Grimwell explained that in this world, the true enemies weren't demons, but angels, the ones who had pushed his people to the edge of extinction. Grabbing her shoulders in panic, he warned that if things continued, the world would fall into ruin and his nation would be wiped out. Igasa, however, couldn't keep up with the storm of strange words pouring out of his mouth. The only thing she managed to grasp was that his name was Grimwell. Complaining, she said it was exhausting to hear so many new terms at once. When she tried to defend herself, insisting she wasn't hooked on cigarettes, the boy suddenly collapsed. Alarmed, she crawled closer, asking if he was all right, only to realize he hadn't fainted at all. He had simply fallen asleep. With a sigh, she decided the best way to deal with this madness was to light a cigarette. Luckily, a pack had come with her, enough to last half a day, and her lighter still worked. But not wanting to set a bad example for the boy, she stepped outside to smoke. That's when she stumbled upon a shocking sight: two angels gripping the severed head of a demon girl. The angels froze, stunned by Agasa's sudden appearance. Their eyes went wide in confusion, because unlike the dead demon girl, Igasa had no horns. To them, she looked like a strange, hornless demon, something they had never seen before. While Grimwell kept sleeping soundly, Igasa stood frozen at the doorway, unable to move after seeing such a terrifying scene. The angels quickly noticed that she wasn't one of them either. Pointing at her, they accused her of hiding the demon boy. Realizing she had been found out, the angels prepared to strike. When one of them drew a shining sword, Igasa instantly understood that a cut from that blade would hurt far worse than any punch. With no choice left, she blew out a massive cloud of smoke. To everyone's shock, the smoke twisted and shaped itself into a gigantic demonic skull. Both Igasa and the angels stared in disbelief as the skull roared and lunged at one of the angels. He had no time to dodge. The skull clamped down, dragging him away, his body thrashing as he struggled to understand what was happening. Blood poured from his eyes and mouth, splattering across Igasa, who shrieked in horror. Then, with a sickening pop, the angel's eyes burst, and his limp body crashed to the floor. The smoke skull groaned, complaining about the awful stench left in the air. If Igasa herself was shaken by the monster she had created, the remaining angel was even more terrified. Trembling, he felt the deadly miasma seeping from the smoke. In a panic, he shouted for help from the archangel and fled as fast as his wings could carry him. Igasa could only watch as the coward vanished into the distance. The noise finally woke Grimwell, who rushed to throw his arms around her. But Igasa warned him to stay back. insisting that the smoke seemed dangerous, though she muttered that if she ever stopped smoking, she would surely die. The boy thanked her with teary eyes, his words clumsy but heartfelt. Igasa replied with thanks of her own. That moment brought back memories of smoking in the black lung zones at work, always under the sharp and judgmental stares of others. But here, with Grimwell's small arms wrapped around her, smoking while protecting a child carried an entirely different weight. In that ruined, unfamiliar world, the taste of her cigarette felt strangely meaningful. Grimwell then began to speak of an old prophecy, one that told of her arrival. It said that when the end of days came, a ritual would be held to summon the great prostitute Sigaholic Sama. He explained that the name meant Mother of all filth, which left Igasa deeply insulted. Brimming with excitement, Grimwell begged her to fight against the angels to save his world. But she refused, saying she was far too old to be swept away by childish eagerness and charge into battle. She even scolded him, telling him it was cruel to use children as soldiers. Grimwell lowered his head and agreed, saying they should first find a safe place to hide. Only then did Igasa notice her body was soaked in the angel's foul blood. When she mentioned it, Grimwell quickly offered her clean clothes, and she felt truly thankful for his kindness. To celebrate, she thought nothing could be better than a cigarette after such forced restraint. But as she reached for her pack, a chilling thought struck her: did cigarettes even exist in this world? She remembered the stone carving she had seen, showing a figure with a smoking pipe, not a cigarette. Worry tightened her chest. Even the angels hadn't recognized her smoke, which meant her power was something rare, something only she possessed here. She quickly did the math: only 19 cigarettes left. That meant she had barely 57 minutes of smoke time. The answer made her break into a cold sweat. Not even a full hour. The truth was clear: she was doomed. In her panic, she even thought about the impossible: what if she just didn't smoke at all? As she struggled with that terrifying idea, Grimwell unrolled a map of the Abysslagna kingdom. He explained that to reach the castle, they would first need to pass through a massive labyrinth, since angels filled the land around it. But then, remembering how Igasa had complained about too many new words, he worried that he should have used something simpler so she wouldn't get tired. A short while later, Igasa stepped out wearing her fresh set of clothes, grumbling that the outfit was far too daring for a woman in her 30s. To her surprise, Grimwell's eyes lit up. He said she looked incredible, just like the woman described in the old prophecies. Shocked at how perfectly the clothes fit, she listened as Grimwell explained he had sewn them using the exact measurements written in the ancient texts. Thrilled, he suggested taking her somewhere safe where she could rest, but Igasa cut him off with a serious question. "Do you know what tobacco is?" His blank stare told her everything. Her fear was right. Already deep in the forest, Igasa chewed on an unlit cigarette, her supply now down to 18. Grimwell pointed ahead, saying there was a safer place not far from there, and Igasa sighed, agreeing that it was better than nothing. As they continued walking, Igasa's nerves only grew worse, and the craving in her chest burned almost beyond control. Each step made her feel weaker, her mind screaming that without cigarettes, she wouldn't survive. The only thing that kept her steady was chewing on an unlit stick, as if it were her lifeline. Then, when her eyes fell on a nearby bush, a ridiculous idea lit up in her mind. Cigarettes were made from leaves, so why not make her own? She studied the one in her hand, realizing it was nothing more than dried leaves wrapped in paper. With a sly grin, she decided that if she could gather leaves and wrap them, she could craft a cigarette herself. Wasting no time, she turned to Grimwell and asked if he had paper. The boy, ever eager to help, nodded and handed her a sheet of parchment from his bag. Igasa stared at it in disbelief. When Grimwell asked what kind of paper a cigarette used, she sheepishly admitted she had no idea, only that it wasn't this kind. But she waved it off, saying that as long as it burned, it would do. Dropping to the ground, she began scooping up dry leaves and tried rolling them in the parchment. But the thick material kept folding awkwardly and refused to hold shape. Her frustration grew as she pressed and rolled. yet the parchments simply fought back. To calm her nerves, she lit one of her real cigarettes. Grimwell tilted his head, asking if it made any sense to burn a cigarette just to make another. At last, after much stubborn effort, she held up her finished creation with pride. Grimwell eyed it nervously and asked if it was safe. Igasa smirked, saying it just had a special smell. She told him to step away so he wouldn't breathe it in, assuring him that as a smoker, she could handle it. Then, without a hint of doubt, she drew in a deep puff of her strange, handmade cigarette. The effect was instant. A sickening wave of nausea rushed through Igasa's body, and she collapsed, thrashing on the ground as the poisonous smoke filled her lungs. Grimwell cried out and ran to her side, only to find her unconscious, froth spilling from her mouth. At that moment, a piercing light broke through the forest canopy. His heart sank. The angels had already found them. This time it wasn't just one or two, but an entire squad of reinforcements descending from the skies. As their feet touched the earth, they gagged, complaining loudly about the foul stench clinging to the air. A medic among them confirmed it matched the report given by the lone survivor. Their leader gave a sharp command: surround the source of the strange miasma. Grimwell's chest tightened. With Igasa out cold, running away was impossible. Still, he stepped in front of her, his small frame trembling but firm, ready to protect her no matter what. His mind raced for a plan, though every path seemed blocked. That's when his eyes caught the pack of real cigarettes inside her bag, and a desperate idea struck him. As the angels advanced, the stench thickened, making them gag and grow dizzy. The leader barked new orders: halt, cover your noses. Following the trail of smoke, they pressed forward. Then realization hit him. The very smell they used to track their prey was now a weapon against them. Their search ended at a single cigarette smoldering on the forest floor. Hidden in the shadows, Grimwell prayed the decoy would send them retreating back to heaven. But the angels were no fools. If a cigarette was burning, its owner had to be close. Grimwell's chest tightened with panic, fearing the smoke's poison would be useless without Igasa awake. But to his surprise, the angels suddenly began coughing and choking, their bodies trembling under the stench. Clutching his head in pain, the leader barked an order for retreat, and with a rush of wings, the squad lifted into the sky to regroup. At last, the forest grew quiet again. Breathing heavily, Grimwell whispered his thanks to Igasa's strange weapon. He remembered her warning not to breathe in that smoke, yet deep inside, something about its scent felt oddly familiar. Then, without warning, Igasa's eyes flew open, making the boy nearly drop her in shock. Overcome with relief, Grimwell cheered that she was alive, while Igasa, still dazed, muttered that she had thought she was already dead. That's when her gaze landed on the cigarette still planted in the ground, releasing its final trail of smoke. With urgency, she crawled over and sucked in what little remained of the burning stick. Turning back to Grimwell, she asked if he had planted it there, and he nodded. He explained that when she collapsed, the angels had closed in, so he had used the cigarette as their only defense. Hearing this, Igasa felt a heavy guilt settle in her chest. She couldn't even scold him for sacrificing one of her precious smokes to save her life. She thanked him softly for protecting her, and Grimwell, overjoyed, eagerly offered more parchment so she could create new weapons. But Igasa shook her head, saying the experiment had been a disaster, and that her skull still throbbed from the attempt. The boy tilted his head in confusion, certain that parchment truly could be turned into a weapon. That was when Igasa's heart stopped. She realized what he had actually done. Her treasured cigarettes had been used. Her eyes darted around until she saw one still burning in the dirt, another smoldering on top of some rocks, and even one jammed awkwardly into the hollow of a tree. At last, she stumbled upon the cruelest sight, a trap where several of her cigarettes had been lit all at once. Her hands shook violently as she clutched her pack, dread crawling up her spine. She didn't want to face the truth, but when she opened it, her fears became reality. Inside was only a single, lonely cigarette. The crushing weight of despair hit her like a heavy blow, and she collapsed to her knees, broken. With just one cigarette left, She felt her world collapsing. The feeling was clear. Her savior was on the verge of death.